Inspired Moon presents Nurses Who Kill. Stefan Lettar. In the quiet town of Sonthofen, nestled in the Bavarian Alps, the Sonthofen Hospital stood as a beacon of care for the community's elderly and infirm. It was here that Stefan Lettar, a seemingly dedicated nurse, began his tenure in early 2003. Born on September 17, 1978, in Herdecke, Germany, Lettar had pursued a career in nursing, a profession that typically attracts those with a deep desire to care for others. However, beneath his facade of compassion lurked a darker, more sinister motivation. Lettar quickly established himself as a capable and diligent nurse, earning the trust of his colleagues and superiors. Yet, soon after his arrival, an alarming pattern began to emerge. The hospital's mortality rate spiked, particularly during Lettar's shifts, and an unusual number of elderly patients were dying unexpectedly. These patients were often in fragile states, battling severe illnesses, which made their deaths appear, at first glance, natural and unremarkable. The hospital administration started to notice discrepancies in the drug inventories, particularly concerning controlled substances like listhenon, a muscle relaxant, and dormicum, a sedative. An internal audit revealed significant discrepancies, prompting a deeper investigation. Autopsies of several patients who had died during Lettar's shifts revealed toxic levels of these drugs, confirming suspicions of foul play. In July 2004, Stefan Lettar was arrested, and under intense questioning, he eventually confessed to murdering 29 patients. He claimed his actions were motivated by a desire to end the suffering of terminally ill patients, presenting himself as a misunderstood angel of mercy. However, this defense was met with skepticism. Many of his victims were not terminally ill but were simply vulnerable and elderly, making his actions appear more like a desire for control and power over life and death rather than acts of compassion. During his trial, forensic experts meticulously presented evidence of the lethal doses of drugs found in the victims' bodies. Medical records, drug inventory logs, and nursing notes were scrutinized, revealing a calculated and premeditated pattern of murder. Psychiatric evaluations painted a complex picture of Lettar's psychological profile. Experts suggested that his actions were driven by a narcissistic personality disorder, with a need for dominance and control rather than genuine empathy. In 2006, Stefan Lettar was sentenced to life imprisonment, with the court ruling out the possibility of parole for at least 15 years. The severity of his sentence reflected the calculated and heinous nature of his crimes, and the profound breach of trust he had committed as a caregiver. The case of Stefan Lettar shocked the public and sent ripples through the healthcare system in Germany and beyond. Media coverage was extensive, with headlines branding him as the death nurse, or angel of death. The case raised urgent questions about patient safety, the ethical responsibilities of healthcare providers, and the systemic vulnerabilities that allowed such a tragedy to occur. Hospitals across Germany implemented stricter controls on medication distribution and inventory management. Enhanced background checks and psychological screenings for healthcare professionals became more common, and whistleblowing policies were strengthened to encourage the reporting of suspicious behavior without fear of retaliation. The societal impact of the case extended beyond immediate reforms. It provoked deep reflections on cultural attitudes towards death and dying, especially in the context of end-of-life care. The taboo and stigma surrounding discussions of death were challenged, leading to more open dialogues about patients' end-of-life preferences and the ethical boundaries of medical intervention. For the families of Lettar's victims, the trauma and loss were immeasurable. They grappled with feelings of betrayal and grief, compounded by the horrific realization that their loved ones had been murdered by someone entrusted with their care. Counseling and support services were provided to help them cope with the psychological aftermath, but the scars remained. Internationally, the case resonated, prompting healthcare systems worldwide to reassess their safeguards against similar abuses. Comparative studies highlighted the importance of contextually sensitive approaches to addressing systemic challenges and promoting patient safety. The lessons learned from the Stefan Lettar case informed global efforts to strengthen healthcare oversight, accountability, and ethical standards. Stefan Lettar's actions transcended the boundaries of a singular criminal act, serving as a catalyst for introspection, dialogue, and action across multiple domains of society. His case remains a stark reminder of the potential for abuse within systems designed to care for the most vulnerable. It underscores the critical need for continuous improvement in healthcare oversight and the cultivation of a culture that prioritizes patient safety and ethical integrity above all else. The legacy of Stefan Lettar's crimes resides in the memories of his victims. Their lives and the injustices they suffered serve as a poignant reminder of the human cost of negligence, abuse, and betrayal within the healthcare system. By confronting the uncomfortable truths exposed by this case and embracing opportunities for systemic change, communities strive to honor the memory of the victims, uphold the principles of justice, and safeguard the integrity of healthcare systems for generations to come. Lettar was sentenced to life in prison for 29 murders, though he may have been responsible for 50 more.
Chapter 44. Jane Toppan. In the late 19th century, in the bustling heart of Boston, a woman named Honora Kelly, who would later be known as Jane Toppan, was born in 1857. Her early life was steeped in tragedy and hardship. Her mother succumbed to tuberculosis when Jane was still a child, and her father, driven by mental instability, abandoned her and her siblings. This unstable beginning set the stage for a life that would eventually unravel into one of the most chilling tales of serial murder in American history. Taken in by the Toppan family as an indentured servant, Honora was given the name Jane Toppan. Her early experiences in foster care were far from nurturing, and the emotional scars she carried would later manifest in the most sinister ways. Despite these hardships, Jane displayed a keen intellect and a warm demeanor, traits that allowed her to pursue a career in nursing, a profession built on trust and compassion. In the hospitals of Cambridge, Massachusetts, Jane Toppan began to forge her path. She was well liked by her colleagues and patients alike, known for her cheerful disposition and apparent dedication to her work. But beneath this congenial exterior lay a deeply disturbed mind. Jane's fascination with death and her desire for control over life and death began to take hold. She started experimenting with morphine and atropine, administering lethal doses to patients under her care. Toppan's victims were often elderly or gravely ill, their deaths easily attributed to natural causes. She reveled in the process of killing, deriving a twisted pleasure from the power she exercised over her helpless victims. Her methods were meticulous. She would vary the doses to prolong their suffering, staying by their side to witness their final moments. This sadistic delight in the act of murder marked her as not just a killer but a predator of the most chilling kind. Her spree of murders continued undetected for years, her position as a nurse providing the perfect cover. Jane's ability to blend in, to appear as a kind and caring nurse, allowed her to continue her lethal activities unchecked. It wasn't until 1901, after a series of suspicious deaths in the Davis family, that her crimes began to unravel. The patriarch of the Davis family, Alden Davis, had died unexpectedly, followed by his daughters. The surviving family members demanded an investigation, suspecting foul play. The investigation led to the exhumation and autopsy of Alden Davis, revealing the presence of poison in his system. Confronted with the evidence, Jane Toppan confessed to the murders, claiming responsibility for 31 deaths, although it is believed she may have killed many more. Her chilling confession, delivered with a disturbingly calm demeanor, shocked the nation. The trial that followed was a media sensation, with newspapers across the country covering every lurid detail. Despite her detailed confession and the overwhelming evidence against her, Toppan was found not guilty by reason of insanity. The jury determined that she was incapable of understanding the nature of her actions. She was committed to the Taunton Insane Hospital, where she would spend the rest of her days. Jane Toppan's case had profound repercussions. The medical community was forced to confront the terrifying possibility that a caregiver could be a killer. hospitals re-evaluated their protocols, increasing oversight and implementing stricter measures to monitor the behavior of their staff. Toppan's crimes also sparked debates about the insanity defense and the legal criteria for determining criminal responsibility, influencing future legislation. The legacy of fear and distrust that Jane Toppan left in her wake was felt far beyond the immediate circle of her victims. Communities that had once felt safe and secure were now gripped by paranoia, struggling to rebuild trust in the wake of her betrayal. The nursing profession, once viewed as a bastion of compassion and care, faced intense scrutiny as a result of her actions. In the decades following her death in 1938, Jane Toppan's story has been retold and sensationalized in books, documentaries, and films. Each retelling adds to the mythos of the "Angel of Death," as she came to be known, while also raising ethical questions about the portrayal of true crime and the fine line between informing the public and exploiting tragedy for entertainment. The psychological aftermath of her crimes extended to the families of her victims, who were left to grapple with profound grief and unanswered questions. The communities she once served were left to cope with the fear and mistrust that her actions had sown. The trauma of her deeds underscored the far-reaching impact of serial murder on society, highlighting the need for support and healing for those left in its wake. Jane Toppan's case also challenges traditional notions of gender and violence. As a female serial killer, she defied societal expectations and forced a re-evaluation of the roles women could play in criminal behavior. Her actions demonstrated that the capacity for cruelty and evil knows no gender boundaries, prompting deeper examinations of the intersection between gender, power, and violence. As we reflect on Jane Toppan's life and the horrors she perpetrated, it is essential to remember her victims. Each life she took was an individual with hopes, dreams, and loved ones left behind to mourn. Establishing memorials and conducting commemorative events can serve as acts of healing and remembrance, honoring those who suffered at her hands and ensuring their stories are not overshadowed by the infamy of their killer. Studying Jane Toppan's life and crimes provides valuable insights into the darkest corners of human nature and the vulnerabilities within our societal systems. Her story serves as a sobering reminder of the importance of vigilance, accountability, and compassion in preventing such tragedies from recurring. By learning from the past, we can work towards a future where the horrors of Jane Toppan's actions remain an anomaly, and the trust between caregivers and those they serve is restored and upheld. Jolly, Jane Toppan. Inspired Moon presents Nurses That Kill. Serial Killers in White. Chapter 41. Niels Högel. Niels Högel. In the sterile, fluorescent-lit halls of German hospitals, where trust was implicit and safety a given, a predator lurked in plain sight. Niels Högel, a seemingly dedicated and competent nurse, had begun his career in 1999 at the Oldenburg Clinic. He was enthusiastic, often going above and beyond in his duties, earning the admiration of his colleagues. Yet, beneath this facade of professionalism and care, he harbored a dark compulsion that would turn the sanctity of healthcare into a harrowing nightmare. Early in his tenure, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Patients under Högel's care frequently suffered sudden and unexplained declines in health. While some colleagues noticed the anomalies, attributing them to bad luck or coincidence, the true nature of Högel's actions remained concealed. His method was both cunning and horrifying. He administered lethal doses of heart medications such as potassium chloride and adrenaline, drugs capable of inducing severe cardiac arrest and life-threatening arrhythmias. Högel's motive was as twisted as his actions. After plunging his patients into critical conditions, he would then attempt to resuscitate them, positioning himself as a hero trying desperately to save lives. This charade fed his narcissistic need for attention and validation, as his colleagues often praised his apparent skill and dedication in these life-and-death situations. Unbeknownst to them, the crises he resolved were of his own making. In 2005, Högel's macabre game began to unravel. A colleague observed him injecting a patient with an unprescribed medication, leading to the patient's sudden cardiac arrest. This incident finally brought Högel's actions to light, and he was promptly arrested. The initial investigation led to his 2008 conviction for attempted murder, resulting in a 7.5-year prison sentence. This, however, was just the tip of the iceberg. While Högel was incarcerated, the true extent of his crimes started to emerge. Between 2014 and 2015, investigators exhumed numerous bodies of patients who had died under suspicious circumstances during Högel's shifts. Autopsies revealed traces of the drugs he had used, confirming foul play. Detailed reviews of medical records showed a pattern of unexplained deaths correlating precisely with his work schedule. The subsequent trials were unprecedented in scale. In 2015, Högel was convicted of 2 murders and 2 attempted murders, receiving a life sentence. However, the investigation continued, revealing a far more extensive and horrifying scope. By 2017, the full breadth of his killing spree was becoming clear. A comprehensive trial between 2017 and 2019 resulted in Högel being found guilty of 85 additional murders. The courtroom was filled with hundreds of witnesses, expert testimonies, and grieving families, each detail more shocking than the last. As the investigation delved deeper, it became evident that systemic failures had allowed Högel's killing spree to continue unchecked for so long. Hospitals had failed to act on early warning signs, such as the unusually high number of deaths during Högel's shifts and suspicious patterns in medication usage. Some hospital administrators faced legal consequences for their negligence, highlighting the critical lapses in hospital management and oversight. The cultural and systemic issues within the healthcare facilities were glaring. A lack of effective monitoring and reporting systems, insufficient drug inventory controls, and a tendency to underreport or ignore concerns created an environment where Högel could operate with impunity. The healthcare system was forced to confront its failures and implement significant reforms to prevent such a tragedy from happening again. In the aftermath of the trials, the German healthcare system underwent major overhauls. Stricter protocols for drug administration, patient monitoring, and incident reporting were introduced. Hospitals implemented more robust surveillance and auditing systems, and medical education programs began to emphasize ethical practices and the importance of whistleblowing. Awareness campaigns were launched to encourage healthcare workers to report suspicious behavior, ensuring that these reports would be taken seriously and investigated thoroughly. Niels Högel's psychological profile became a subject of intense study. Experts suggested that his actions were driven by a combination of narcissistic traits and a pathological need for attention and admiration. He derived gratification from the chaos he created and the subsequent recognition he received for his resuscitation efforts. Understanding his motives helped in developing better preventive measures and psychological screening processes in healthcare settings. The case of Niels Högel left an indelible scar on the medical world, serving as a chilling reminder of the potential for catastrophic abuse within trusted professions. Restoring public trust in the healthcare system became a paramount challenge. Efforts focused on transparency, accountability, and the implementation of effective measures to prevent such incidents in the future. Continuous improvements in monitoring and oversight were essential to ensure that the healthcare system could swiftly detect and address any potential misconduct. Niels Högel's story is a harrowing example of how trust can be betrayed in the most sacred of professions. In the years following Högel's convictions, the lessons learned from his case have continued to shape healthcare practices and policies. The emphasis on ethical training, robust oversight, and a culture of vigilance remains paramount in safeguarding patient welfare. Niels Högel's story serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked power and the vital importance of maintaining the highest standards of ethical practice in healthcare. Inspired Moon Presents. Nurses That Kill, Serial Killers in White. Chapter 42, Amelia Dyer. Amelia Dyer. Amelia Dyer's story is a chilling tale of exploitation, deception, and the dark side of Victorian society. Born Amelia Elizabeth Hobley in 1837, she grew up in a time when illegitimate pregnancies were heavily stigmatized, and options for unmarried mothers were limited. This societal pressure created a demand for baby farmers, like Dyer, who offered to care for infants born out of wedlock for a fee. Dyer would place ads citing, "Married couple with no family would like to adopt healthy child. Nice country home. £10, or, small premium." Dyer's criminal activities likely began in the 1860s, although the exact number of her victims is unknown. It's estimated that she may have murdered over 200 infants over the course of her gruesome career. Her modus operandi involved taking in babies from desperate mothers, promising them a better life, only to subject them to neglect and abuse. Laudanum, a popular Victorian-era medicine known as a mother's friend, was readily available and often used to calm fussy babies. Dyer exploited this by administering lethal doses of laudanum to infants in her care, causing their deaths. She is also known to have strangled infants with packing tape. She would then dispose of the bodies in various ways, including dumping them in the Thames River or burying them in her garden. Dyer's crimes went undetected for years due to the transient nature of her operations and the lack of oversight in childcare at the time. However, suspicions began to arise as more and more infants in her care went missing or were found dead under suspicious circumstances. The turning point came in 1896 when the body of a baby girl was discovered on the banks of the Thames River. The child was traced back to Dyer by some packaging which had a former address written on it which she had used to line the box, leading to her arrest and subsequent trial. During the investigation, authorities uncovered evidence linking Dyer to numerous other infant deaths. At her trial, Dyer pleaded guilty to the murder of one infant but showed no remorse for her actions. She was swiftly convicted and sentenced to death. Before her execution, she is said to have confessed to many more murders. On June 10, 1896, she was executed by hanging at Newgate Prison in London. Amelia Dyer's life before her descent into infamy offers some insights into the factors that may have contributed to her criminal behavior. Born into a working-class family in Pile Marsh, Bristol, England, she experienced poverty and hardship from an early age. Her father was a shoemaker, and her mother struggled with mental illness. These circumstances likely shaped Dyer's worldview and may have influenced her later actions. Dyer's first marriage, to George Thomas, ended in tragedy when he died of tuberculosis, leaving her a widow with a young daughter to support. Desperate for financial stability, she turned to baby farming as a means of income. This decision marked the beginning of her criminal career, as she saw an opportunity to exploit the vulnerability of unmarried mothers and profit from their desperation. The Victorian era was a time of strict social mores and rigid gender roles, which placed significant pressure on women to conform to traditional ideals of femininity and motherhood. However, Dyer's actions defied these norms, revealing a darker side of maternal instinct and female caregiving. Dyer's descent into murder and infanticide likely involved a combination of psychological, social, and economic factors. Her willingness to exploit the most vulnerable members of society for personal gain speaks to a profound lack of empathy and moral conscience. It's possible that she viewed the infants in her care as commodities rather than human beings deserving of love and protection. The sensational nature of Dyer's crimes captured the public imagination and sparked widespread outrage and condemnation. The sheer scale of her atrocities and the calculated nature of her deception shocked Victorian society to its core, prompting calls for reform and stricter regulation of adoption and childcare practices. It inspiring Parliament to pass new laws like the Infant Life Protection Act of 1897 and the Children's Act of 1908 to end baby farming and strengthen regulations around adoption and fostering. The case also served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked greed and the consequences of turning a blind eye to the suffering of others. Amelia Dyer's legacy continues to fascinate and horrify to this day, serving as a stark reminder of the capacity for evil that resides within the human psyche and the importance of vigilance in safeguarding the most vulnerable members of society. The case of Amelia Dyer shocked Victorian society and prompted widespread outrage and calls for reform in adoption and childcare laws. Her crimes highlighted the vulnerabilities of illegitimate children and the dangers of unregulated baby farming. Dyer's legacy serves as a grim reminder of the horrors that can occur when greed and cruelty go unchecked.